Welcome, everyone, to the first Bet What Happens live of the 2023 NFL season. Right now, we have the Kansas City Chiefs just scoring a touchdown to take a 13-7 lead, getting ready to make the extra point. I am Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. Joining me, Grant Neefer. Grant, what'd you think of the first half so far? We got 34 seconds left. Been pretty wild.
Yeah, it's been fantastic first half. I mean, Lions have actually looked really good. It's just pretty much two little mistakes that have gotten them to this point. It's that big play on those third and long, and then the fumble by Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I mean, to me, they've looked like the better team so far. I actually just hit them at plus 390, plus 400. I can't remember what it was a few seconds ago. Money lines all the way down to plus 330 now. They got 34 seconds, decent chance they can end up getting a field goal here, a decent chance that they can drive. Their offense has just looked really good. Montgomery's looked good. Gibbs looked good. Amon-Ra St. Brown looks like the same player he was. This offense is solid. The defense has looked pretty good outside the last minute. I mean, it is a matchup versus Mahomes, but in my opinion, you shouldn't be getting plus 400 for a team down 7 that has looked like the better team. I know that it's based off of the 210 plus 210 or plus 185 that closed at line that the lines are at, but plus 330 I still think is too low, and I think you can find in some places as high as 380. But I would still take that. I think Detroit's going to come out, and I think they have a real good shot at winning, much better than the 20% or so implied odds.
Yeah, exactly. So right now at Bet365, Detroit is plus 330 on the money line. Kansas City minus 450. We do have 34 seconds left in this half, which means there is time for Detroit to at least attempt to come back. Kansas City does start with the ball in the second half. One thing I want to point out, Kansas City, of course, has a one-score lead, a one touchdown lead. When Kansas City is leading, these two teams last year combined for 6 seconds per play faster than league average, when Kansas City leading and Detroit trailing. So this should be a pretty fast-paced game in the second half. One thing we could potentially do is look at the over as well. Right now, the live line is 48.5 at Bet365. They've scored 21 points so far, and Kansas City, the team that should be better, will have the ball to start the second half. So I think this is a spot where we also could potentially look at a live over, knowing these two teams are going to be playing quicker than league average for the current situation, the current game situation. But right now, just to go over a couple quick stats, Patrick Mahomes has 147 passing yards. I've been eyeing his under all game so far, but now that they took the lead, it's kind of shifted a little bit for me. So Patrick Mahomes, my live projection for him is 287 passing yards, and his live line is 280.5. So unfortunately, early on when Kansas City fell behind and they were still favored, it was one of those counterintuitive spots where, oh, Kansas City's trailing. That means Mahomes going to pass for a whole lot more, right? Well, not actually, because they're favored. And now look, they have the lead. So I was taking his under once Detroit took the lead, but now that Kansas City has taken the lead again, unfortunately, there really isn't any value on that Patrick Mahomes passing prop. So, Grant, just what do you think about maybe that live 48.5 over under that I was talking about?
I just got it 47.5. Not that that's going to make too much of a difference. But yeah, I like what you're saying. Again, both offenses look good. I mean, this game realistically probably should be 20 or 14-14 right now. Again, the fumble, the slow start. But yeah, we're going to see an uptick in pace. Both offenses look pretty darn solid here. Mahomes is being Mahomes, finding a way to do things. But like everything on the Detroit side is just really solid right now. Like I'm loving everything I'm seeing out of them. I think this is going to be a much higher scoring second half. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm sweating a few live bets too that are looking pretty solid. And I'm looking at those player props for the total here. I mean, all of them are down right now, but I think it's going to be interesting after this drive when things pop up for the halftime. I think there's going to be a few spots that I'm definitely going to look at. I mean, an interesting thing is I still think that Detroit, even being down 7, like trailing, doesn't make a huge difference. Like for their rushing volume, I still think it's going to be there. I mean, granted, Gibbs may end up with a little bit, if they start trailing more, he's going to end up with a little bit more time later in the game. Just if they're trailing by 14, just because he is the better pass game guy, but they're still going to mix in Montgomery. I'm looking at his over of 55.5 rushing yards right now, and I think that's still a pretty solid line.
Yeah, so right now Montgomery has 33 rushing yards. I have a median of 25 more for the rest of the game. So it's right at that 58 and a half. And I think you said 55 was the line. So
55.5, yeah.
Yeah, 55 and a half. So I'm actually showing a little bit of value on that over there. So if you like that, definitely a bet you could lock in. So just to recap where we are right now, there are 9 seconds left in the half and ticking down. Detroit trying to scramble here and get the playoff. They spike the ball with 7 seconds left in the first half. So Josh Reynolds just caught that 9-yard pass there. So right now, just looking at the box score, we have Jared Goff at 127 passing yards. Josh Reynolds with 30 receiving yards. So 29 now. It's kind of, updating as we go through it. Sam Laporta with 23 receiving yards on 3 receptions. And now, of course, another completed pass there. Jared Goff up to 135 passing yards. So things are kind of happening on the fly as we speak. And 5 seconds left in the half, trying to get a playoff there, incomplete. So we're just waiting for halftime to hit here because Detroit is, in the middle of a drive. It's hard to update all the data in real time, and books are updating. Once we get to halftime, we'll settle in, but we definitely have some angles to look at. Looking at that potential David Montgomery over. We're looking at potentially Detroit on the money line or Detroit to cover the live spread. We're also potentially looking at a live over for this game. So a lot of things going on, but we're just waiting these last 5 seconds of the half for things to settle in here. Grant, where do you think maybe the first thing we should look at, once we go to halftime? I'm gonna let you direct the very first place we look.
So, I mean, I think the receiving game is going to be where I want to end up looking at halftime. I think there's a lot of interesting spots. Like I already mentioned a little bit earlier, Amon-Ra St. Brown over 87.5 receiving yards. He's at 48.5. His total before the game was right around 78.5, I think is where it closed. I got a 75.5. So essentially, they're just kind of assuming that the odds before the amount of yards before the game is going to be consistent with the second half of this game, even though they're trailing by 7. I get that they're not getting the first half kickoff. It's obviously a little bit of a downgrade here. But overall, I think it's a spot where faster pace should more than make up for that. And realistically, like they're going to be passing. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy that can get it done later on in the game. Line just moved up by 1 yard, so that makes it a little bit worse. But that's definitely one that I'm interested in. Looking at the other guys, Gibbs is going to be an interesting one that I think we have to take more of a look at based on how the first KC drive goes. I think it could potentially offer some value. If KC ends up coming out and scoring a touchdown, then that's a spot where you can definitely end up hitting the Gibbs over for receiving yards. I think that as long as the lines say semi-similar, based on the result of the KC first drive, is going to be whether I want to hit either the Montgomery over on rushing yards, because if they don't score, then I think that's a great bet at 56.5 right now. And if they do score, then I think you're looking at Gibbs over receiving yards.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it is halftime. Detroit was unable to score on that drive. So we have hit halftime. Right now, just to reset, 14-7, Kansas City leads at halftime based off of the live odds at Bet365. It looks like Kansas City is about 80%, just around 80% to win on the live money line, which means Detroit is around 20% to win there once you remove the juice. So Kansas City leading, that means we are looking at this faster pace of play. So we'll go right to that receiving game that you mentioned. My live in-game model for Amon-Ra St. Brown projects him for a median of 41.5 more receiving yards. He has 48 now. So that would be 89.5 receiving yards. If we look at his live receiving yards, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm just trying to scroll down here and find receiving yards. What do we have for Amon-Ra St. Brown?
87.5.
87.5. So we're looking at 89.5. So you said you like that over. I don't know if that's a bet you want to lock in with my model showing 89.5 versus 87.5, but it is pretty tough to find a couple yards of edge in live betting.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely. I mean, again, it's going to largely depend on what ends up happening with this first drive. That's kind of the big differentiator for a lot of these bets. As of right now, I still do have a lean on the over for Amon-Ra. But yeah, we'll kind of see. The interesting thing that I'm watching from one of my pregame bets is Montgomery under 11 or 12.5 receiving yards. Now it's live at 5.5, and it's not going to surprise me to see him get a dump off at some point. I mean, he's going to still be playing. Again, that's another line that I would look at based on the outcome of the first drive. If they end up scoring, then Montgomery's going to get a bit more play time. If they don't score, 5.5 is too low of a line. I would hit that over.
Yeah. So here's one that I'm looking at. And this one's pretty interesting because, you know, I was looking all game at these Patrick Mahomes unders on his passing yards, and then they took the lead. But now that we're in the second half, now that we don't have that kind of like 2-minute drill and Kansas City has a 1-score lead, I don't expect them to be, you know, necessarily changing the amount that they pass at this point in the game. But late in the game, if they're still ahead, they could take the air out of the ball. So Patrick Mahomes right now, 147 passing yards, his live line 280.5. What do you think? And right as I say that, it goes down to 279. What do you think about over or under for Patrick Mahomes, 279.5?
I think that I'd probably have a slight lean towards the under. I mean, again, he did not have a ton of yards. I mean, they were on their own 10-yard line for that last drive, and then outside of 5 or 6 yards by Pacheco, I think he just passed the entire way down the field. Like he went from like 55 to 147.
Yes,
real
exactly. So I'm my model actually is showing 257.5 for his number, and he's at 279.5 now. 257.5, have to take that with a grain of salt because they're going to start with the ball. So you can project them to get some chunk of yardage, but also as the clock keeps winding to start the second half. So I'm going to make this my first bet and the first bet of Bet What Happens Live this year. I'm going to take, I should say, Patrick Mahomes under 279.5 passing yards as live bet number 1 for the 2023 NFL season. Grant, your turn. You don't have to make a live bet or anything, but just curious where you're looking, if you have made anything or if you're about to make anything.
So it is interesting right now. There is a ridiculous line on Detroit, and it's actual ARB opportunity on the money line sitting at 440 somewhere. I'm going to hit that, but again, I would hit it at 300, but 440 is just a ridiculous line. I don't understand it at all, but that's again, I think the main bet is Amon-Ra St. Brown, the total on the money line. We've already talked about that. Again, everything else, I'm kind of just waiting on this first drive. Like I said,
yeah.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, his line is now up to 89.5. That makes it a little bit rough. Montgomery's receiving yards line has gone up to 7.5 at this point. I guess the line that I would hit kind of regardless of the outcome of the first drive, Josh Reynolds over 44.5 receiving yards. He's at 29 currently, so needs 16 more. That's definitely a line that I would end up, that I definitely think I'm going to hit.
I have a 17.9, so 18 more median projected for the rest of the game and 19 average. So definitely showing value on that over there if you want to lock that in as a bet.
Yeah, I'm just going to look at the target totals here. Dig into it a little bit more. That's not showing targets. Darn you live scoring website. It's been a year, so I can't remember which one. Switching between sport after sport after sport and what I use to kind of watch things.
I've got a bet here. I'm going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown, second half anytime touchdown score, 3-1. I'm showing plus 255 as fair value on that. We know Detroit's going to be passing. They're trailing, and we're already showing projection value on that. So let's go ARSB, second half anytime touchdown score, 3-1 at Bet365.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to add something onto that. Gibbs plus 300 any touchdown score.
Yeah, he's plus 3. If you go specifically to second half anytime touchdown score at Bet365, he's plus 350. So definitely you should take that, because my model has him 3-1 instead of 3.5-1. So I'll lock that in with you as well. I'll take Gibbs. I'll take 1 unit on Gibbs at 3.5 and 1 unit on Amon-Ra St. Brown at 3-1, second half anytime touchdown score.
I really like that, and it is interesting. Montgomery is also interesting. So prior to the game, he was coming in at plus 125 is what I got him to score a touchdown, and I think it ended up plus 115 by game time. So he's currently sitting at plus 260 second half touchdown score. Again, it's tough to kind of throw this in prior to the first drive by the Chiefs, but again, I think that the Chiefs, even if they scored, Montgomery's still going to be in for a decent workload. It is interesting with the whole entirely new backfield, but not entirely different. Like, Montgomery is a similar-ish player to what Jamal Williams was last year, and it kind of seems like he's so far getting that load, while Jahmyr Gibbs is pretty much mimicking what DeAndre Swift did last year. Yes, they'll use him in the rushing game. They're going to generally try and do less straight up the gut with him and get more on the outside. But they're generally using him in the passing game more than in the running game. And that's what he excels at. So Dan Campbell he likes his 2 running backs. He likes to use them the way that he's used to using them. And so it's definitely a spot where I think that Montgomery, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Gibbs all provide some decent value at those odds, all things considered.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, obviously that 2 tandem back duo there of Gibbs and Montgomery, and they both should get pretty solid work, especially if Kansas City doesn't score on this first drive. I think that's going to be key with David Montgomery. What happens on this first drive for Kansas City? If they come down and they score a touchdown on this first drive, it may not lead to as many rushing yards, right? So this is a spot with David Montgomery where I would like to maybe wait for the first drive of the second half, or at least a few plays, and see, if Kansas City gets something like 3rd and long, and the books haven't adjusted Montgomery to deal with the fact that Detroit's probably getting the ball really soon, then that might be a spot I would want to hop on live. So, right now, David Montgomery, 56.5 rushing yards is his live line at Bet365. And I'm showing pretty darn close to that being fair value, but that's a spot where I'd want to wait, right? If Kansas City, like I said, if they look like they're not going to score, suddenly my model is going to understand that. And I don't know if the books will adjust enough. And then I'd want to take David Montgomery over on those rushing yards, or at least, if he's on the field more as well, just because Kansas City doesn't score, that also could lead to something maybe like a live anytime touchdown bet.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on something. We have a question in chat. Well, it's not really even I think it's a, what's it called? A rhetorical question. But is Sky Moore going to catch a pass? I don't know if that's rhetorical or not, or just venting, but it does bring up an interesting point. So he was actually a guy that I was almost looking, well, the numbers were popping out to take the over at his pre-game receiving yards prop, which I think was 28.5. I could be wrong. I just remember knowing that the numbers were pointing towards the over, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not trusting that. At this point in the game, his current receiving prop is sitting at 15.5. Obviously has done nothing. What does your model currently say about him as a potential bet on the over-under? Or is it?
Yeah, it's interesting because the target distribution, the routes run distribution is a little different than the pregame projection we had. My model is saying he's right at 1.5 receptions for the rest of the game. But I think we got to adjust him mentally down a little bit because, Rashee Rice has been involved a little bit more. Kadarius Toney, though, he's only run 3 routes. So tough to say there with Sky Moore. But I do think he'll catch at least one pass the rest of this game, even though Kansas City is leading. It's just one of those spots where Kansas City, they're still aggressive. They're aggressive until they get a multi-score lead. And so we should see a faster pace of play, etc. So I still like, I still like Sky Moore to at least catch a pass. And I actually have him projected for 1.5 receptions in the second half. Although, like I said, mentally, we might want to adjust that down. I don't know, maybe a quarter or a half reception.
Yeah, so I know your model currently has them listed at exactly 1.5. If we're making an adjustment down, the current live line at 1.5 receptions, -120 on the under, doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. And again, because that 1.5 is a mean, not a median, the median's actually going to be lower. So it's going to be more like 1.3, 1.2, and then a mental adjustment down from that. I think under 1.5 receptions certainly has some value there at -120.
Yeah, so an interesting thing with Toney only running 3 routes so far. His live line for receptions is at 1.5, and it's +145 on the under over at Bet365. What does your
we're betting that? We're betting that right now because we have 1.1 projected rest of game. Oh wait, no, that's 1.5 total receptions, or 1.5 rest of game receptions.
Yep. 1.5 total receptions.
So and he has 1. So we're actually projecting 2.1 total receptions. I see. Okay. So no, I was getting excited there for a moment. That's 1.5 total receptions. Yeah, that's not going to be probably enough value there. But again, if we're 1.1 rest of game is like 1.9 median, and he has 1 now, and then we make a mental adjustment down for the fact that he's only run 3 routes. It's pretty close, and getting that +145, I think I like that. My only hesitation, of course, Kansas City starting with the ball here, but that might be one we wait to try to pop after this first possession as well.
Yeah. What about Richie James? Really hasn't done much of anything. He's currently sitting, it just went down, but he was sitting at 0.5 -200 on the over, +165 on the under, if I remember correctly from a second ago.
Yeah.
What's the model say about him getting a reception in this game?
Richie James, so he has 1 right now, and he has 1 reception, or sorry, 0 receptions, 1 target. But I do have him at half a reception rest of game. He has run 8 routes, right? He's run a lot more than Kadarius Toney. I mean, more than double the number of routes. He just hasn't caught a pass yet on that 1 target. So I think probably want to mentally adjust him upward versus where we were, mentally adjusting Kadarius Toney down. So maybe Richie James is a little bit of a recipient of the fact that Toney has not been running as many routes. So if we bump that up closer to 1 reception, I think it's probably a coin flip whether he gets reception or not the rest of game.
Yeah, no, and it looks like the under 165 is now down to +145. So it's kind of getting interesting. And the outcome of this drive will likely determine whether that's a good bet or not. If he goes without a catch,
and
has a big effect on it. But if they score, then just increase the chance of rushing the ball later in the game. This could be interesting.
For sure. We're into that second half now.
Watching the first drive.
We're watching this first drive. Exactly. Isaiah Pacheco catches a 10-yard pass, which puts Patrick Mahomes up to 157 passing yards. So like you said, there's a couple spots we're looking at. We're kind of waiting on this first drive. I really like, which receiver was it? I already forgot that we were looking potentially at the under for his receptions. I think it was Kadarius. No, which one was it that was running? Yeah, Kadarius Toney under on his receptions rest of game because he's only run 3 routes. So just gonna kind of have to keep track of that because I think that's probably the last. Pacheco may be injured. Interesting. Yeah. Looking at it here, he's definitely hobbling off. He looks a little, I wouldn't say woozy, but he certainly doesn't look 100% walking off, although he doesn't look terrible here. But that's definitely an interesting development. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes on to the field in replace, and pass incomplete here for Patrick Mahomes, and it'll be 3rd and 10 for the Chiefs. So this is the spot right here. So Kadarius Toney did run a route there. This is the spot. They're in 3rd and long. They're about to lose the ball. Kadarius Toney on those receptions. Let's see. We have plus 135 to the under 1.5 rest of game. I think we have to look at probably taking that under, given the fact that he's just not running a high route rate here. So it's off the board right now because the 3rd down play is underway. And it looks like 4th and 7. So they'll be punting it away. The Chiefs will be, unless they pull Dan Campbell and go, fake punt or something. I liked that aggressive play from inside their own.
So Montgomery
is
sitting at 57.5 rushing yards, I think is a go now.
Yeah. Montgomery, 57.5 rushing yards. We've had 2 minutes run off the clock. So let me just quickly pop that into my model, and it'll be that. And Detroit should improve on the money line. They have. So for Montgomery, I have
Detroit money line all the way down to plus 300 right now. So I'm feeling good about my plus 400 and plus 440.
There you go. Yeah, so I have 55 rushing yards for Montgomery total in this game. Looks like things are starting to slowly pop up. And Kadarius Toney under 1.5 receptions, plus 135 now. Not going to bet that. And Montgomery, you said the live line. Oh, wow. That's rushing and receiving. His rushing yards is...
Last time I saw it was 59.5. Now it's at 60.5. It keeps going up. So.
Yeah, it's going up, and that's an avoid right there. So
I still don't hate it at 60. I just don't like it. It's
exactly.
Offering probably nominal sub 1% ROI in my opinion. So yeah, it's kind of a tough one. Let's see the receiving yards for Gibbs. Gibbs is currently sitting at that's receptions, yards. He's sitting at 36.5. Not seeing how much he actually has in the game right now. I don't know why that's not showing up.
Yeah, I have 35 as his full game median. So again, probably no value there, right in line with the market on my live model. But we have completed that first drive. So we'll go ahead and sign off here for the first Bet What Happens live of the 2023 NFL season. We're going to be live with you every Thursday night and Monday night football game, and maybe some more as the season progresses. So got our bets locked in. Hope you all enjoyed the show, and we'll see you for Monday Night Football.
Okay.